Now, from the Pope John Paul II Cultural Center in Washington, D.C., Raymond Arroyo.
Welcome to The World Over Live. Happy Memorial Day weekend to all of you here in the United States. Father Robert Sirico is back with us tonight to help us unpack the latest news from the week. And we wanted to take a look at the true meaning of Memorial Day in this episode. So later in the program, Fathers Paul-Anthony Halladay and John Broccato, both U.S. Army chaplains, will be here to talk about their ministry to our troops at home and abroad. Plus, Carmela Laspada will join us to talk about the national moment of remembrance that takes place each Memorial Day. Find out how you can take part. But first, here's the brief news from the world over this week. A lot of news coming out of Washington. The U.S. military's don't ask, don't tell policy may soon be coming to an end. The White House has backed a compromise deal lifting the ban on openly homosexual men and women serving in the military. Under the agreement, Congress will expedite a vote on the matter instead of waiting for a Pentagon review to be completed in December. Implementation of the law would take place after the Pentagon review and after the military certifies its policies and regulations are consistent with standards of military readiness. Gay rights activists have been pushing for a quick vote before the expected Democratic losses in the November elections. More legislative action on the matter is expected in the coming days. And the Senate Judiciary Committee is being urged to postpone confirmation hearings for Supreme Court nominee Elena Kagan over a lack of reviewable documents. Senator Jeff Sessions, the ranking Republican on the committee, said the GOP would seek to delay the hearings unless all of Kagan's Clinton-era documents are made available. Kagan was a top advisor in the Clinton White House for 4 years. The Clinton Library, a spokesman there, said it would be very difficult to produce Kagan's documents in time for the hearings, which are scheduled to begin on June 28th. Pro-life groups have also expressed concerns about properly evaluating Kagan during the hearings without the records, since she has no judicial record. And this past week, the Obama administration sided with the Vatican in a clergy sex abuse lawsuit before the U.S. Supreme Court. The administration is arguing that the case does not meet federal standards necessary to sue a sovereign nation. The Vatican is typically immune from the jurisdiction of U.S. courts under the Foreign Sovereign Immunity Act, as are all nations. The Solicitor General's office recommended that the case be returned to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals for reconsideration. The original suit was filed in 2002 by a man who says a priest abused him more than 40 years ago. He alleges the Vatican conspired with the Archdiocese of Portland and others to protect the priest. A separate lawsuit is filed in Kentucky. That's still before the courts. Plaintiffs there claim the Vatican is liable for U.S. bishops who allowed priests to abuse children. And in an apparent response to Arizona's new immigration enforcement law, it was announced on Tuesday that President Obama will deploy up to 1,200 National Guards troops to help curb border violence. The Associated Press is reporting that the move comes as hopes for comprehensive immigration reform are dimming, and pressure is mounting on the president to implement some sort of enforcement effort at the U.S.-Mexico border. In addition to the deployment, the president is asking Congress for $500 million for border enforcement. And at his press conference Thursday, the president repeated his call for Congress to take up the issue. The Obama deployment is similar to the one authorized by President Bush in 2006. And the U.S. bishops are calling out dissenting Catholic lawmakers and organizations who supported the recently passed health care bill. In a statement, the bishops singled out the Catholic Health Association, among others. They said their actions caused confusion and a wound to Catholic unity. The bishops further rebutted claims that their divergence was, quote, merely a difference of analysis or strategy with the bishop's staff. Instead, they said, the break was a fundamental disagreement with the bishops themselves. The bishops further asked that Catholics now come together to fix the profoundly flawed health care law. And the Vatican is trying something new on the biotech front in an effort to raise public awareness of the use of adult stem cell research. The Vatican has teamed up with an international pharmaceutical firm to promote the technology. The Pontifical Council for Culture and NeoStem announced the joint initiative Tuesday. The goal is to expand research and raise awareness of promising adult stem cell therapies. The current public misconception is that embryonic stem cells offer the most therapeutic promise. The Vatican and NeoStem would like to correct that assertion. In addition, the program would offer information to the public and academia about the problems, moral and otherwise, with embryonic stem cell therapies. The Vatican has made an initial pledge of $1 million to the effort. And on Wednesday, Archbishop Jose Gomez was officially received as the new coadjutor for Los Angeles. 4,000 plus faithful packed the Cathedral of Our Lady of the Angels to welcome their new shepherd designate with a rousing standing ovation. Earlier last month, the Holy Father appointed Archbishop Gomez to head the LA Diocese when Cardinal Roger Mahoney retires. The Cardinal reaches the mandatory retirement age of 75 next February. Archbishop Gomez addressed the congregation after the rite of reception Mass, tearfully accepting their warm welcome and entrusting his ministry to Our Lady of Guadalupe. Archbishop Gomez is a native of Monterrey, Mexico, and most recently served as the Archbishop of San Antonio. We wish him the best. And there was a moment of great national pride for the faithful of Poland this past weekend. 16th century Catholic astronomer Nicholas Copernicus, who discovered that the Earth revolved around the sun, was reburied at the Cathedral of Frombork. Poland's top prelates and thousands of faithful were on hand to remember the great scientist. To set the record straight on Copernicus's relationship with the Church, 500 years ago, Copernicus was buried in an unmarked grave at the cathedral, where he had held the title of canon. The unmarked burial was nothing out of the ordinary back then for those who ministered at a church. For a short time, the Catholic Church blacklisted Copernicus's great work, but not until some 75 years after his death, when some attempted to use his heliocentric theory to undercut prevailing theological beliefs. Copernicus was not condemned or buried as a heretic, and the Church made no official pronouncements against him or his theory. In fact, his great work was dedicated to Pope Paul III and written under the auspices of his bishop. When we return, Father Robert Sirico of the Acton Institute is here. The World Over Live continues in a moment. Stay with us.
Now, once again, Raymond Arroyo.
My first guest is the president of the Acton Institute for the Study of Religion and Liberty in Kalamazoo, Michigan. He's a parish priest there as well, and he's a world-over contributor. It's been a while since your last visit. Please welcome back to the program Father Robert Sirico.
Good to be back with you.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Let's get into the USCCB came out this week, and they had some pretty strong words. You heard it in the brief there.
Yeah.
They said that those groups, particularly the Catholic Health Association, which defended and advocated and indeed was responsible for the passage of that health care bill that includes funding, federal funding of abortion, they said this didn't represent just a fundamental disagreement with our staff, but the bishops themselves. So they're taking this personally. What does this mean?
That is a very precise sentence. That raises it to the level of theology. It's not just a matter of politics and prudence and all of these things where there can be a legitimate diversity of Catholic opinion. And, I think that's a very serious and a very strong statement, especially when you have the president of the association as a vowed religious.
Sister Carol Keehan.
Who received from President Obama the pen that signed that legislation. And I think it is I don't think the word scandalous is too hard a word to put into it. There's another part to this whole thing that I think represents a kind of culture, and that is, heretofore, part of what gave legitimacy to the Catholic Health Association was their association and collaboration with the bishops.
Well, Sister Carol, sitting in the chair you're sitting in today, told me, we're just reflecting here the will of our bishops. We're working hand in hand. Yeah. How dare you suggest there's any disagreement between us and the bishops, Mr. Arroyo? Well, hello?
I've heard that many times, but what I want to link it to is the Campaign for Human Development, and then the whole discussion and debate and now withdrawal from the LCCR, the Leadership Council for Civil Rights.
Yep.
The bishops were with them, and then there was another controversy previous to that. All of these kinds of things represent a certain culture that either doesn't see that the alliances that are being made are undermining the core sense of what the church is about. And then in a practical sense, when you have a piece of legislation like the healthcare legislation that came up, your friends betray you. And I'm glad to see the bishops now speaking out very clearly.
Yeah, we've got to hand it to the bishops. For too many years, these things would go on. They'd get shuffled under the rug.
There's a real shift taking place.
And the bishops have come out, and you had three bishops, Cardinal DiNardo, Bishop Murphy, and Bishop Wester, who came out. This is a joint statement on behalf of the conference.
There's no light between them. This is very clear, and I wouldn't be surprised if they were responding directly to what Sister said right here.
This is an interesting comment. We will never conclude that we must accept what is intrinsically evil so that some good may be achieved, referring to the health care bill.
That's St. Paul. We cannot do evil, the good may come.
Now, here's the thing that Catholics get. This really makes the blood boil. And on a hot day like this, mine is boiling. When you see Sister Carol Keehan, who's obviously the object of the bishop's scorn here.
Obviously.
She is going to be the commencement speaker at Gonzaga High School, a esteemed high school here in the nation's capital, a Jesuit-run institution. She's going to be offering the commencement to these high schoolers.
But this represents the culture. You know, we have 40 years of this. 40 years of this kind of mentality where our institutions, in effect, were eroded. They were co-opted, in some cases completely taken over. And now I think the strength of this bishop's statement is telling us this is a new day. And certainly when you have bishops like Archbishop Gomez being appointed in Los Angeles and other bishops throughout the country, it is really a new day. So let's not get too discouraged about it. I mean, the ship is turning.
Well, it's interesting. The bishops are also protecting their teaching authority in that statement.
Right.
So we'll see how consistent it is, because the bishops have also said you are not to celebrate or honor any Catholic who advances opinions that are at odds with the core Catholic teaching, mainly the teaching on abortion and life.
Sure, and marriage.
And yet that's what we're seeing here at Gonzaga.
No, well, there are canonical problems that are going to have to be worked out, because there's questions of jurisdiction, and I think it's going to take some time before all of this kind of filters through, and the culture itself has changed.
Let's move on to this mosque at Ground Zero, steps away from the tragedy of 9/11. A mosque is now going to be erected, a super mosque.
Yes.
Looks like it's being funded from folks in the country or abroad, but nonetheless, they've gotten the support of the local community board. Now it goes before the New York Building Commission, I believe, who has to determine whether the building that currently is on the site can be torn down to make way for this mega mosque. The families are up in arms.
You know what touched me really very deeply was one of the people at that meeting before the council or the committee or whatever it was, said, "This is my brother's grave." And you're allowing them to put a mosque on that. Now, I'm not saying if this is a plot of land that's privately owned and people want to donate to it, I think we're hard-pressed to make any kind of legal or justice case that you can't build a mosque there. What I would say is, are you being prudent? I would say it to the imams who are involved in this. Is this a prudent step? And then what will be the focus of this? Is this a triumphal statement? Because if it is, this is unacceptable.
They're claiming
this is a reparation.
They're saying this is a new peaceful face of Islam that they want to show. It's a way to start over again. And here in the United States, there is the religious freedom. that would allow the erection of this mosque.
That's
that's just the law.
It's an incredible country, even when it's painful. As I say, especially to be talking about this on Memorial Day.
And let's pivot to a story that I've been following for a long time, this Mojave War Memorial.
Yes.
This is in the middle of the Mojave Desert. It is literally a rock with a cross, a big 7-foot metal cross.
Not a big church.
Not a mosque, not a cathedral, not a temple, just a simple metal cross on a rock in the middle of the desert. For years, it's been tied up in litigation. It was literally boxed. They put a crate around it.
Only in America.
To protect the eyes of passerbys.
That had to come out of the mind of a lawyer.
Yeah, well, or a couple of judges. So the Supreme Court recently ruled at the end of April that this cross could remain on federal ground. Within days, the cross was stolen. Then, this past week, the cross reappeared. Someone put a replica of it, metal cross, 7 feet high, maybe it was 8 feet, it was a foot higher, on the same rock. The government came in, and the Justice Department came in and said, wait a minute, the Supreme Court ruling only covers the original cross, not this replica. Take it down. It was taken down this week on Memorial Day week.
To juxtapose these two stories, the one about the mosque going up there, where I say, we have to have religious freedom in this country. Yep. The Second Amendment says that the government will make no law with regard to the establishment of religion. Right. And then to take down a cross, simply because it's a cross. It really, I'm looking for the positive here. It tells us of the potency of the symbol of the cross. Because if it was any number of other religious symbols, you wouldn't have this kind of controversy. But Christianity has remained and retains its potency in terms of the message that it presents.
And now, the Catholic Church locally, there's a Catholic priest down there at St. Peter's Catholic Church.
That's
right down in the Wall Street district.
There.
He's supporting it. He's in favor of the mosque. He says they need to establish a place such as this for people of goodwill from mainline Christian, Jewish, and Muslim faiths so they can come together and dialogue. Is dialogue possible when that much pain is associated with that site and so connected with a misinterpretation and a radicalization of Islam?
Well, certainly we need dialogue predicated on reason, as the Holy Father said in the speech that caused so much controversy in Regensburg. And if these imams who are there are prepared to engage in that, then who knows that this at some point won't be a good thing. But I can't imagine the pain of the families that are involved in this.
And just to wrap up the other story, I can't imagine the pain, and I've heard from a lot of them this week, the veterans who have gone out to that Mojave War Memorial. This was a World War I memorial. This thing's been there for 75 years. And there are families who've gone out there to remember their dead, and subsequent generations who've given their lives for their country and freedom. I'm all for religious freedom. We need to have religious expression in the public square.
Right.
That includes the mosque as well as this memorial. Right. And there has to be consistency.
Especially on a Memorial Day. Raymond, I just watched The Pacific. I don't know if you got to see it on, is it HBO?
HBO, yeah.
And when I met the chaplains who'll be on in a few moments, I mean, it really, my family served, my uncle was at Pearl Harbor. Yeah. And so to honor the dead, to honor those who gave the supreme sacrifice is a solemn obligation of a nation. And if we don't do that, we lose ourselves.
I want to pivot to a cultural story this week that was a bit surprising, I have to say, and made me happy to be an Apple computer owner.
Yes.
Steve Jobs was in an email back and forth with a blogger by the name of Ryan Tate, who writes for Gawker.com.
Sounds like an interesting character.
Yeah, well, this is interesting. Tate was very upset because the new iPad and the iPhone do not have apps for pornography, portals for pornography. They're forbidden in the Apple universe. And this guy Tate said, you are imposing your morality by having Apple forbid pornographic applications on iPad. Jobs wrote back, Steve Jobs, the CEO of Apple Computer, writes back, and he says, he said, you might care more about porn when you have kids. We're just doing what we can to try to make and preserve the user experience we envision. Yes. You can disagree with us, but our motives are pure.
That's right.
This is fantastic news.
It is wonderful. It's especially wonderful to see a CEO of his stature using his position and all of the technological genius behind it to really be promoting something that is for the good of society. I love what Jobs said when he was accused of curtailing freedom. He said, yep, freedom from programs that steal your private data, freedom from programs that trash your battery, freedom from porn, yep, freedom. This is free enterprise at its best.
Exactly, because people are free, and he even said it in the back and forth. He said, we believe we have a moral responsibility to keep porn off the iPhone. Folks who want porn can buy an Android phone. The Android is Google's competitor phone. So it's very interesting as these other companies rush to make the dollar.
Refreshing.
At least Jobs has some moral principle here. I like that. I think it's a great story. There was another story in the Washington Post this week, Father. The Democratic National Committee and President, then candidate Obama, when he was running, made a great effort to reach out to religious voters. There were Catholics for Obama and evangelicals for Obama.
Catholic Democrats.
Yes, they spent a lot of money targeting Catholic voters and religious voters in general. Now they're being charged, it appears. 2 years later, the Democratic National Committee's faith outreach has dwindled to more than half. The staff of more than half a dozen has dwindled to one part-time staffer. What does this tell us?
Well, it tells us that they're getting their greetings out for Passover and Rosh Hashanah out late, because they just now posted the greetings. That was back in March and in September. What this tells us is religion is the operatives, the political operatives, see that religion isn't useful in this round of elections, and they're just kind of letting the mask slip.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I was reading a lot of commentary this week on this story.
But they should never again say to the Republicans that you just have window dressing in terms of your outreach to blacks, because this is exactly what they were doing.
Window dressing.
You know, that you're just hiring people to say that they're Republicans in the way the blacks, in the way the Republicans have been accused of doing with blacks. The difference with the Republicans is that there have been a long series of religious people and religious institutions involved in conservative issues drawn to the Republican Party. So it's a very different kind of thing.
Yeah, it's a long-standing relationship, particularly the evangelicals, who have been very involved politically for a long time. Yeah.
And the Democrats lost the Catholics. You know, that's the bottom line, because of the issues we've just been talking about.
Which is their natural base, has long been the natural base of the Democratic Party.
Has been in my family.
And they swung back this past year. We'll see if that happens in these November elections. We'll certainly be watching. In England and Wales, we covered this story, Father. There was an ad, a group called Marie Stopes International. It's a pro-choice group in the UK, pro-abortion group. Came out with this ad, and they are airing it next week. The bishops of the UK and Wales have come out to condemn it. Now, they've used a kind of a law in the English code that allows them, as a non-profit, to advocate or migrate women toward abortion services. Your thoughts on this? And is this a harbinger of what we may be seeing on these shores?
You know, it wasn't so long ago that the very thought of birth control commercials or condom commercials would have been from the land of science fiction. And now we have, I'm sure this is going to be a very tasteful, understated ad, but it will have all of the gravity of advertising your place, in the concentration camp. This is life we're dealing with. This is not a commodity. And to prey upon vulnerable girls who are at a difficult moment in their lives where they need the support to choose life is a nefarious act, I think.
One more story, and this sort of ties to the first story we talked about today. The bishops coming out and saying these dissenting Catholics who supported the health care bill really were defying the teaching authority of the bishops. Yes. A story just broke yesterday, and it was of a Dr. Grossman. He is a Planned Parenthood abortionist, and he also, apparently, is a physician with full medical privileges at a Catholic hospital, Mercy Regional Medical Center in Durango, Colorado. Your thoughts on this, if it's true? We assume this is a true story.
If it's true, I think this is highly problematic. This is not, I can imagine people defending this saying, well, he's a doctor and he can do good. And so the fact that he's an abortionist, it's not going on here. The answer to that is simply consider what it is he's doing. This is not a personal sin or some kind of thing that he's out of communion with the church or whatever. This is the act that goes directly against the Hippocratic Oath. This is an act that makes being a doctor an absurdity. This is the taking of a human life rather than the defending of a human life. And to have the same person go from one clinic in the morning to a hospital in the afternoon and perform different procedures is morally ghoulish.
Well, we saw that case of the nun down in Arizona who apparently gave the green light on an ethics board to an abortion in a Catholic hospital. Bishop Olmsted came out last week and said she excommunicated herself by virtue of her action.
He did not excommunicate her.
Correct.
He merely recognized what canon law says, and certainly Sister understood very well what she was doing.
Very good, Father Sirico. Thank you, Father, for coming. Looking forward to your next visit. For more on Father Robert and his work, visit the Acton Institute at acton.org. When we return, Fathers Paul-Anthony Halladay and John Brocado, both U.S. Army chaplains, will be here to talk about their military ministries. The World Over Live continues in a moment. Stay right there.
Now, once again, Raymond Arroyo.
My guests tonight are both U.S. Army officers and Catholic priests. They're military chaplains and work in the largest geographical diocese in the U.S., the Archdiocese for the Military Services. Their assignments can take them from the relative safety of a stateside post to a potentially deadly war zone at a moment's notice. They handle the spiritual and sacramental care of our men and women in uniform all over the world. Joining us to talk about their important work and to share their thoughts on this Memorial Day weekend, please welcome Fathers Paul-Anthony Halladay and John Brocado. Gentlemen, thank you both for being here.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure having you. I want to start, you both are recruiters for the military archdiocese.
Correct.
And for the chaplaincy. What is the most difficult challenge you face?
As a recruiter, the most difficult challenge, I think, is first getting the word out there about what we do as chaplains and how that differs from, say, your normal parish priest work. And then the second thing would be to convince the bishops of the need for the chaplains in the military. All of them have needs in their own dioceses, and so, of course, they're first thinking about that. Right. But to get an understanding of exactly what we can do for you as a priest is one of the most...
So is it the priest you have to convince or the bishop?
The bishop, for the most part.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I hope those bishops are listening. Father Brocado, you just returned from a tour in Iraq.
I have.
What is the thing that you learned that you didn't expect to learn while you were there? I know that's a loaded question, but...
Well, personally, I learned what it means to be in the desert, literally, of course, and figuratively also. There's not much, because of the shortage of priests in the military. There's not very many. There's not much brotherhood in a combat zone. Opportunity to meet another priest is slim.
But you have the fraternity, though, and the brotherhood of the men you're serving.
Oh,
and the women you're serving.
Absolutely. But, there's one thing. Yeah, I'm very close to my men and women, my soldiers. But there's just something about having a priest brother that you can confide in. We have unique struggles.
Absolutely. What is it like? You too, Father Halladay, you are also in Iraq for tour of duty. Yeah. The challenges of that scenario must be very difficult in that you're spiritually counseling these people at the height of, things are coming at them, challenges they didn't expect. They're being deployed into different areas instantly, and the terrain is certainly not easy.
Right.
What are the particular challenges that you face there?
Well, it is the day-to-day situation. You never know what's going to happen, and it can change on a dime. Things can be, relatively peaceful for a period of time, and then the next thing you know, there's, gunfire going everywhere, bullets ricocheting off the back of your chapel. Literally, it can be like that. But I think ironically, the beauty in all of it is that the men and women who are in the theater of combat recognize more clearly now than they probably would or probably ever have back home their need for faith and religion. And so they're very, very open then at that point to be able to talk about God and to listen to what you have to say about a relationship with God.
And you are reaching out to not only Catholic members of the military, but non-Catholic members as well, yes?
Oh, sure.
Yeah, and they come to you. I imagine when you lose comrades on the field, the men are the deceased are sent home, but you then have to deal with their comrades behind. Correct? Is that a large part of what you deal with? Sort of the counseling of these men, helping them get over the loss.
Sure. We're the chaplain for a unit, and then we're also Catholic priests for all the Catholics, not only in our unit but also the broader picture, even in the area of operation. But regardless of their faith denomination or their religious preference, they still come to us for spiritual guidance, whether it's marriage counseling in Iraq or it's dealing with the loss of their friend who didn't make it through a convoy attack. It's a very broad ministry base. Yeah. It's beautiful. It's beautiful.
Father Halladay, what is the relationship between the priesthood and the military? How do they complement each other? Because on the surface, people will say, well, what could they possibly have in common? One group are trained killers, these other people are ministers of peace.
Yeah. Well, I think probably the first place to look at our communion of saints in the church. I mean, we have so many saints that come from a military background. And being an infantry chaplain was my first assignment, and the assignment that I was in Iraq with was an infantry unit. St. Maurice is the patron of the infantry, and St. Maurice was an infantryman himself. Wow. And so a lot of times I'll connect the two with that and to say, you know what, a soldier's life is very, very similar to the life of a priest in terms of the austerity that's oftentimes involved with both types of life. Certainly the self-sacrifice and the service that one has to give and for the good of another. And so you can find in both of these roles a very unique way in order to be able to give yourself, and a very complementary way in both respects.
Yeah, when I was interviewing some of the chaplains who were responsible for the fire brigades that went into 9/11, each of those chaplains said, this experience with these men in these crisis situations have changed my life and enriched and deepened my priesthood. I've often thought, since seeing that experience, every priest after ordination should go and serve a tour of duty, just a year, 6 months, with a military unit, whether they do it here at home or abroad. Your thoughts on that, and what the priest gains from spending time among these men and women who are committed to a common cause, really the last institution outside of the priesthood where you see that possible and happening.
Well, I think it's a great idea. Preach it, brother.
Yeah.
I think it would be essential. I mean, character building. It would give them a great understand what we call BOG, or boots on ground, a real sense of ministry. Not only that, is it calls you to essential professionalism, as well as really getting your feet, your hands dirty. It's huge. I mean, a huge part of being a chaplain, being a good priest in the armed services, is being where your soldiers are. You really get an understanding of what they go through and who they are. You're cold, they're cold. They're hungry, you're hungry. It's wonderful.
Yeah, there's a real sense of you suffer and jubilate with your people.
A real compassion.
Yeah, which is what a father does in the family.
Right. Exactly.
So it's a great, I suppose it's really a building experience for you, and has deepened your priesthood as well, yes?
The only thing I would add to it is that it gives so many dimensions of the priesthood to work as a chaplain, because you work as both a missionary, you also work as an apologist for the faith. Just so many elements of what you do. You're an ecumenist. I mean, you're out there with people of all faiths and no faith at all.
In real time.
Real time, exactly. And so you're able to bring that to them in so many different dimensions.
Father Bricado, I want to start with you. What first drew you to this mission? This is not for the faint of heart.
Well,
was there a military background in your family?
There is, actually. My cousin is a Black Hawk pilot. He was the one that planted the seed. It took me about 3 years to water and answer the seed. Of course, my bishop is a retired brigadier general, and so he supports the military. Very holy man. I'm very thankful for his. Just want to say that to you, Bishop.
What diocese are you in?
That's Alexandria, Louisiana. Bishop Herzog, Ronald Herzog.
The Holy Land, as I call it.
Oh, of course, Louisiana.
That's
beautiful.
Right. the Holy Land. Father Halladay, what inspired you to become a military chaplain?
You know, it was my last summer in the seminary, and we every year we had the chaplains to come in and present their program. But I had a free summer that summer. I needed to fill it with something, and so I listened to the chaplains present their different chaplaincies. And the Army just made the best case of needing priests the most. And of the services, we are the most in need of priests, just because of our numbers, the sheer numbers of the Army compared to Air Force and Navy. So I thought to myself, I have a free summer. It's something I could do, really giving an insight into this other aspect of what it means to be a priest, as I was preparing to be one, because I was not ordained yet. And so that's how I started it. And then from then, it just kind of grew inside of me. And I went to my bishop. It took me 4 times. I went back to him for four years and asked him if I could go to the chaplaincy. And after 9/11, he said, I know they're going to need you. And so Archbishop Lipscomb was my archbishop who said, yes, please go help our men.
Down in Mobile. Retired now, but a great, great archbishop. Let's talk for a moment about this Memorial Day. Memorial Day too often here in the United States has become about baseball games and barbecues and a day off. What does it mean to you now, having served in a theater of war? Good. Father?
It's huge. Once I received my combat patch in Iraq, we have a patch ceremony, it changed everything. It changed everything. The fact that I can say that I'm a veteran of a war, and this day commemorates all of the men and women, the shoulders that we stand on as a nation, as this great nation, to be counted as one in the ranks of those. Although, I still have a long way to go. It's amazing. It just puts a different spin on this day.
Father Halladay, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think your next guest, Carmela, is going to really bring this to a real focus. But it really is remembering those who have paid the ultimate price for our freedom. And I think as a military chaplain, it has just driven that message home to me more and more. For me, Memorial Day was, a day off, or, a day with the family, or picnic, or on the parish grounds, or something like that. But since I've been a military chaplain, I really have understood more completely the sacrifices that our soldiers, sailors, Airmen, Marine, Coast Guard personnel make for us, and what a debt we owe to them, and particularly for those men and women who have given the ultimate sacrifice of their life.
And I imagine you all are in a perfect position to understand the depth of that sacrifice. It's not always with their lives. It's sometimes in their relationships, in their families. And I often think of the personal sacrifices that they make every day. When I see these kids sitting next to me on a plane, leaving Dulles, going abroad, they've got their whole lives ahead of them, and you see them stopping their lives here and going abroad to take on this mission. That's got to be inspiring, seeing it up close every day.
Oh, it is. And to see the self-sacrifice of these young men and women, certainly. And that at the end of the day, nobody can pay you enough to put your life on the line, to defend others. And that's what they do. They go out there every day and they step in the breach for the rest of the nation. And it's inspiring.
Father Bricado, why should a young man who's considering the priesthood consider the military chaplaincy?
I think that just the opportunity to serve both God and country is very unique. Very unique. The fact that we can be ministers of the sacraments, administrators of the sacraments within a combat zone when soldiers are most vulnerable and need hope, but also come back and also have the opportunity to serve and minister to the families is a unique blend of serving country and God at the same time.
Father Halladay, a priest once told me, who was a chaplain for a time before returning to parish work, he told me that when you live among military men and women and you see that ongoing sacrifice, that it not only reshapes you as a person and a priest, but that this is a time for warriors, and that it teaches you how to become, in some ways, not a physical warrior, but a spiritual one.
Sure, yeah.
And that was the thing he carried into his ministry. And he said, it was like I was supercharged coming out of this experience. Has that been your experience?
Very much so. In fact, one of the things that also compelled me to become a chaplain was the self-discipline that's involved in being a military person. And I think those lives certainly correspond at a physical nature, but they also correspond at a spiritual level too. And that is because your spiritual life becomes much more self-disciplined. Your spiritual life becomes much more imbued with what it is that you do every day in terms of making sure things are done and done correctly and done how they have to be done in order to pass military inspections and such. And your spiritual life becomes that way too.
Father Bricado, this is a question that I've often had. Are you considered, when you're in the field, particularly in a war zone, are you considered a priest first or a military man first?
It's a good question. I would say that my identity is locked up in being a priest first. Of course, you have to have that mentality whenever you're in a combat zone, because when things get crazy or they go a different direction than you're used to, you have to have that mentality that there is something greater than you present that encompasses us all. Of course, we know that that's our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Being there with us in the battle zone gives you and gives your soldiers hope.
What should people be thinking about and bear in mind this Memorial Day weekend, Father, as they begin this time alone and together?
First of all, they should be very thankful for their families and very thankful for the freedom to be able to celebrate a Memorial Day. And that has been given to them by the men and women who have volunteered to serve in an all-volunteer army. And so in that thanks for family and in that thanks for the opportunity to celebrate, thanks also for the men and women who have made it possible.
And Father Bricado, what is the process? If a man is watching this show and he may be in a seminary now, he may be considering the priesthood, what does he do?
Well, first of all, start praying and pray for God's will to be done. Then I would suggest approaching his bishop and ask his bishop to discern with him about this call to the Army chaplaincy or the military chaplaincy. And then after he's spent some time talking and preparing, go ahead and call one of us.
Okay.
And we can get him going in the right direction.
Well, I want to thank you both for your service, for your priesthood, and for taking the time to appear on the show.
Well, thank you.
Both. Thank you.
God bless you.
For more information on the Archdiocese for the military services and how to become a military chaplain, if you're considering that vocation, you can visit milarch, milarch.org. Thank you again, Fathers. When we return, the woman responsible for the annual National Moment of Remembrance and how you can take part this Memorial Day. The World Over Live continues in a moment. Stay right there.
Now, once again, Raymond Arroyo.
Welcome back to The World Over. As a former White House Special Projects aide during the Vietnam War, my next guest had a powerful experience that inspired her to dedicate her life's work to memorializing all the men and women who gave their lives in service to their country. In 1997, she started the National Moment of Remembrance, observed each Memorial Day at 3 p.m. Here to talk about how you can participate in the National Moment of Remembrance, please welcome Carmela Laspada. Carmela, thank you for being here. Pleasure to have you. Now, I recently saw this in some of your materials. A Gallup poll found that only 28% of Americans know the meaning of the Memorial Day holiday. I'm sure it's less now. This was several years ago.
Probably.
What are your thoughts?
Well, when I heard that, it wasn't surprising, but I think that's when I decided we really have to do something. And it was interesting because when it started, I did not know that was the situation with the Gallup poll, because how the National Moment of Remembrance began is that I was going to Mass. I go to Mass every day at noon. I was walking through Lafayette Park. This was in 1996. And I saw these children, they were around 10 years old, and they were in the park touring, and I decided on a whim, I'm going to ask them what Memorial Day means. And I said, Memorial Day is next Monday. I said, what does that mean to you? And they all looked at each other and they said, well, that's the day the pool opens. And I said, well, that's true. I said, but you could go to the pool, you could have fun like you're having today because people died for the freedom for you to do, and choose to do what you want to do. They looked, didn't have a clue. And then I went to Mass, and then I prayed. I said, gee, we should do something. And so I called my Poor Clares, the Perpetual Adoration, my prayer team, and I said, gotta pray. I said, I'm asking for the Holy Spirit to give me some guidance. We need to do something. So in 1997, I decided that the largest number of people enjoying their freedom on Memorial Day is in the afternoon. Well, why not at 3 o'clock? Which so many means about 3 o'clock. And then I had asked my other angels, the AFL-CIO unions, the painters, firefighters, ironworkers, and sheet metal workers, to help me with this.
And they did?
Yes. They've been fantastic from the start. And so I decided, I said, pray to the Holy Spirit. And I dedicated also to the Blessed Mother, because it was her month, May. And I said, Major League Baseball. And I visioned this. I said, they should stop the games in progress. And everybody said, you're crazy. I said, why not? They have the freedom. You have a great American game. They have the freedom to play and enjoy it. And so many people there. And they were on board the first time I called.
And they do this on Memorial Day.
Every
they stop the games
day,
at 3 o'clock.
The games in progress, they stop at 3. We have a video that we show them. And I never forget when I got a call, they said, oh, Carmel, this was just terrific. It was at Yankee Stadium and also with the Phillies in Philadelphia. And they said, ladies and gentlemen, have your attention, please. Now, you can just visualize this. And the players came out of the dugout, and the others who were on the field stood at attention. The umpires took off their masks, and they said, then they played the video. And you couldn't hear a pin drop. And they said, but afterwards they saw these children saying, what was that all about, Daddy? So that they will remember that. And then we got Amtrak to blow the whistles on other trains. And we have now over 30,000 grocery stores that stop through the Food Marketing Institute and National Grocers Association. And then Dear Abby has been very helpful. She puts the comment that's going to be appearing this Sunday. So we're working with so many groups, but it's just a matter of getting the word out.
Carmela, you were in Vietnam and had a moment that sort of
Yes, God tricked me. I said that God tricked me.
A whole mission with you very early on. Tell us quickly what happened, because I want people to know how they can take part.
Well, I went, decided when I was going to Walter Reed Hospital to help the Vietnam veterans, because they weren't being recognized as they are today, which is just wonderful because of the anti-war feeling. And so I decided to take a trip to on a USO tour to visit them in the Camp Salmon in Vietnam. And at one of the hospitals, the doctor came up to me and he said, I'd like to have you staying with this one dying medic. He said, could you stay with him? I said, of course. So I sat beside his bed, and he was telling me how 35 of his buddies died in his arms, going one to another, and couldn't save any of them. And they were known as the Black Scarf Battalion. And he said, could you do something someday to remember them and their families, the children they left behind, and to all of them who've died? And I said, well, I don't know what I can do, but someday I will do something. And he said, well, I want you to have this black scarf. His battalion commander gave it to him. I said, no, I couldn't. He was going back and forth, yes, no, yes, no. Then he said this, it will seal the promise. And it was interesting. That night, because I have a lot of Jesuit friends, and Sophia University with Jesuits, and I was going out to dinner that night with this Jesuit, and I told him about this. And he says, Carmel, your life has changed. I said, you got to be kidding. I said, I want to do something, but it hasn't changed. Well, was he right?
It had changed.
Yes.
And in 2000, then President Clinton signed the Act of National Remembrance.
Exactly, because I said, well, I could die tomorrow. There goes this moment of remembrance. I said, it should be a law of the land. So then in December 28th, 2000, he signed it into law.
So how can people take part? All the people watching, what do you want them to do?
Well, wherever they are, we ask them to stop at 3 p.m., to think about those who died, but not only think, to make a commitment to give something back to your country in their honor. Just a simple thing, even just being a good person. Our theme is live honoring America's fallen, but every day of the year. And for that one moment, we're not hyphenated Americans. We're not Republicans, we're not Democrats. We connect as human beings and as Americans. And it's so important. But every day, Memorial Day, just giving back, just being a better person. And that's a great legacy.
Well, and remembering and saluting the men and women who today go out and sacrifice, as the priests who were just on the program reminded us.
Absolutely.
I think not enough attention. We don't give enough attention. We don't teach our children the love of sacrifice, the love of country that led to the ultimate sacrifice from so many of these men and women. I know living here in the D.C. area has changed our lives because we take the kids to the Memorial Day parade, which seems like, everybody goes to the parade. No, it becomes a teaching moment. you're surrounded by veterans from Korea, from Vietnam, some World War II vets. For the kids to touch them and talk to these veterans, it has changed their lives. There's a picture of a couple of veterans and the kids on their nightstands. And they say, oh, you know, Daddy, I pray for, you know, Mr. Wilbur, I pray for... It's left such a mark on them. And I think I would encourage people to take part in these celebrations. It's a national sacrament, and it's a great moment. So the National Day of Remembrance, and it's at 3 o'clock, right?
3 o'clock.
Moment of remembrance.
Yes. Wherever they are, you just stop and think and say a prayer, whatever it is. It's giving back and it's remembering. It's putting remembrance into action.
Very
it's not
good.
Have to remember to put
well,
it into
Carmela,
action.
thank you for putting remembrance into action for all these years and staying in there. I love it. Somebody, in some of the press material, a Marine Corps general, described Carmela as a cross between Mother Teresa and a Marine drill sergeant. I think he's being unfair. You're more Mother Teresa. For more information on the National Moment of Remembrance, visit their website at remember.gov. Until next week, you can find updates and the occasional commentary by me following, or rather, you can follow me on Twitter at twitter.com/Raymond Arroyo. And I'm going to be speaking in Vancouver, Canada this Memorial Day weekend. So for those of you in Vancouver, we'd love to see you. You can visit my website, RaymondArroyo.com, for all the details. And I'll be up in Toledo, Ohio at the top of June, and would love to see all of you there. Until next week, we'll be scouting the world over for all that is seen and unseen. On behalf of the staff and crew of EWTN News, I'm Raymond Arroyo. Thank you for watching, and happy Memorial Day. God bless our troops and all those fallen heroes. See you next time. Bye now.